Welcome, everybody, to episode 42 of Black and Gold Weekly, a weekly Boston Bruins show here on YouTube in partnership with Black and Gold Productions. I am your host, John, and we're going to be taking a look at this past week for the Boston Bruins. It was a fairly quiet week, a very light schedule, only a couple of games, as this very weird schedule to start the season continues with no real flow to it. We're going to be talking about that. We're also going to look ahead to the upcoming week of games for the Bruins, take a look at their upcoming opponents and what we should expect in those matchups. Also want to talk about Patrice Bergeron. He had a huge night last night against the Red Wings. I want to take a look at the other teams in the Atlantic Division as well. So we're now around that 10-game mark for everybody. Some teams a little less, like the Bruins, some teams a little more. But right around that 10-game mark, I think it's a good time to look at the rest of the division, kind of see how everyone is doing and how the Bruins look compared to their biggest competition. So it's going to be a fun show here. Again, I want to give a big thank you to Mark Allred and the entire team at Black and Gold Productions. This show would not be happening without them. So a big thank you to them for all of their support. And as always, I want to draw your attention to the links in the description of this video. If you're in the market for Boston Bruins apparel from any other NHL team, or NCAA apparel from any college, those three links down in the description have everything that you need. They've got all the normal stuff, like hats and sweatshirts, t-shirts, jerseys, sweatpants, things like that. They have a lot of other team-branded accessories available as well. So if you want, stuff like mugs or water bottles or all sorts of different team-branded things, they're all available down there using those links in the description. So it would really be appreciated if you could check those out if you're in the market for any of that. And it's certainly getting close to the Christmas time and the holiday season would make a great gift as well. So with that said, let's get into it here. I want to start by just looking back on these past couple of games for the Bruins. Because they, again, like I said, it was a fairly light week. They had a long stretch off, Sunday through Wednesday, no games. They played on Saturday, and then they played again last night on Thursday. But take a look here at how they did. The Bruins did win both of these games, and this was big. These are a big couple of wins for the Bruins because, they were, like we talked about last week, Danny and I were talking about what a roller coaster this season had been. We wanted to see some more consistency out of the Bruins. We really wanted to see them start to put some consecutive wins in the win column. Well, they've done that this past week. If we look here, the first game comes from last Saturday against the Florida Panthers. And Florida, going into this game, was undefeated. And this was obviously a very tough matchup for the Bruins, a very tough opponent. But Boston was able to get it done in the shootout. And no shame in that. I mean, I don't care how you get the 2 points. They went out and they got the 2 points that they desperately needed. They gave the Panthers their first loss of the season, and to this point, their only loss of the season in the shootout. And it was a great hockey game. It was a lot of fun to watch. It was two teams that looked like they were very evenly matched. And it was a really enjoyable hockey game. So if we look here, Charlie Coyle opened the scoring. And I'll tell you, Charlie Coyle's had a very solid start to this season. He's done a very good job of being productive early in this year, and I hope that continues all year long. But Coyle scored in the first period for the Bruins, gave them the 1-0 lead, and it was 1-0 for a while. But then early in the second here, Anthony Duclair answered for the Florida Panthers, and that allowed the Panthers to get back into this game and tie it back up. And then in the third period, there were only 2 goals scored total in the first 2 periods. But then in the third period, Alexander Barkov actually gave the Panthers a lead. He, obviously one of the best centers in the NHL. Big goal there. And that, it got a little nerve-wracking there when the Panthers went up. You were kind of like, oh no, like are they going to lose a heartbreaker here? But Charlie McAvoy answered for Boston was able to tie the game up, and then once it got to 2-2, it stayed that way all the way through overtime. It was all the way rest of the third. OT, nobody scores in overtime, goes to the shootout, and then Charlie Coyle scores the game-winning goal in the shootout. And that was a really, really big goal for him, a really big goal for the Bruins. The only scoring in that shootout, Ullmark came up really, really big in goal in this game, throughout the game and in the shootout, making all the saves that he needed to in the shootout as well, but played really well in the game as well. Boston only gave up 2 goals to the Panthers, who are one of the best offensive teams in the league. And it was just an overall really solid win and a really big win against a top-notch opponent on home ice. So thought overall it was a really good game. Ullmark played well. The team as a whole played fairly well. It was obviously a big night for Coyle, scoring in the first period, and then again the winner in the shootout. So that was just overall a really solid game and good to see from Boston. And then they had this long break again, which we've seen the Bruins have so many times already this season, but they go 4 days without playing a game, and then they play again last night against the Detroit Red Wings, also at home. And this was a dominant win by the Boston Bruins. And this was the kind of game that you were hoping to see from the Boston Bruins. And they go out, they outshoot the Red Wings 37-15. They win 5-1. They go 3 for 5 on the power play. Just an absolute dominating performance from the Boston Bruins, and led by their captain, led by Patrice Bergeron, who scores 1, 2, 3, 4 goals for the Bruins in this game. A 4-goal night for Bergeron, who picks up his first 4 goals of the season. And boy, was it good to see him get going. We talked last week that it had kind of been a slow start for Bergeron. Thought he might be showing his age a little bit. Well, he had no issues whatsoever in this game against Detroit. Just absolutely dominating performance, and really, really good to see him get going as he nets not just his first goal, but his first 4 goals of this season, all in this matchup against the Red Wings. And again, Boston solid defensively. They only give up 15 shots against, only 1 goal allowed. One of the biggest things that with this team from earlier in the year was, I had questions about them defensively, and were they going to be able to keep the puck out of their net? And these past couple games, phenomenal job. They've only given up 3 total goals in the past 2 games. Exactly what you want to see from not only the goaltenders, but the overall team defense as a whole. The offense has finally gotten going. We had that. There were the 2 games last week when they lost to Florida and when they lost to Carolina on back-to-back nights, and they scored a grand total of 1 goal between those 2 games. That obviously brought up some questions throughout the offense and some worries about, what were they going to be able to do? Well, they go out, they win the Florida game 3-2, and now they win this game 5-1. They're putting the puck back in the net again. So, again, it shows how much things can change on a week-to-week basis in the NHL, how a team that has been on such a roller coaster as the Bruins have to start this season, can go from giving up bad goals and not being able to score one week to scoring a total of 8 goals in 2 games and winning both of those games, and only giving up 3 total goals in those games the next week. I mean, it shows what and how the ups and downs can move in the NHL. Hopefully now this isn't just a peak on the roller coaster for these Bruins. Again, consistency was the big word that Danny and I kept talking about last week, was just, trying to find some consistency in their game, getting them playing at a high level on a more regular basis, not just some good games here and there. It's been a great last 2 games, but hopefully it lasts more than just 2 games. Because again, with the way that this season has started, it could just be a peak on the roller coaster in 2 good games and then they come back down. Now, hopefully that doesn't happen. I think one of the big things for the Bruins coming up this coming week is to be able to continue to keep this level of play up and to continue to play at their potential the way that they can, because these past couple games, we have seen what the Boston Bruins can be. We've seen how good they can be. This is what this team is supposed to look like. I think the challenge now for the Bruins, again, is consistently playing at this level. Not just having a couple good games like they did against the Sabres and the Sharks, and then following that up with 2 lousy games like they did against Florida in the first time in Carolina. Like, now they've had 2 good games against the Panthers and the Red Wings. Now they need to follow those up with more good games, not just be happy with what they've done and drop back down and lose the next couple. Like, they need to follow these games up with more good performances, and that will be what I want to see from this team, consistently playing at this level, which they should be able to do with the roster and the talent that they have. But no doubt about it, Boston's this past week, these last 2 games, very, very solid, very good-looking team. Played much better defensively, got the offense going. Obviously, Bergeron has a huge breakout game against Detroit, and Boston picks up 4 out of a 4 possible points, 2 more wins in the win column as they look to continue to climb the standings in the Atlantic. So nothing to really be upset about there these past couple games. Boston's looked really good and are playing like the Bruins should. So obviously, Patrice Bergeron, huge story after last night's game. And this was a guy that, we talked about quite a bit on last week's episode. He was off to a slow start. He wasn't as impactful. Certainly, there were some questions, being raised about, are we going to start to see a little bit of a step back from Bergeron? Is he going to start to show his age a little bit? I think up until last night, he had this season started to decline a little bit, but then he absolutely pops off last game. 4 goals for him, obviously great to see him get going. Obviously, the Bruins need that top line to be at an elite level for them to be an elite team. This team runs through that top line, and they have to be going for this team to be successful. Marchand's had a great year all year. He's been their top point producer, their best player. Pastrnak and Bergeron kind of started off slow. Then Bergeron has this big breakout last night. Hopefully he can build off of that. It's obvious. It's great that he had this one huge game, but it can't just be one huge game and then him go back to another 3 or 4 with only maybe a point or 2. He needs to build off this and keep the production going. And obviously he's not going to score 4 goals every game. We all know that, but he needs to keep being that impactful player, keep being that productive player, and build off of this big performance against Detroit. And then Pastrnak really hasn't gotten going yet this year. He's kind of that next guy that I want to see. Him and Taylor Hall, because Taylor Hall he's chipped in some assists. He's got a couple of goals, but he hasn't really had that huge impact that I was hoping for yet. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but he hasn't yet. I want to see Pastrnak and Hall be the next 2 that really get going and, put together a couple games where they are really productive, putting pucks in the net, scoring some goals, getting on the score sheet. If the Bruins can get all of these guys going, they can be one of the best teams in the league without question. They just need to, get everything firing on all cylinders. I think that's one of the things that we talked about last week was that, this team hadn't really gotten it all put together yet. But then over the course of these last couple games, they're starting to show many more signs of putting it all together. And hopefully that can continue. Hopefully that can continue to just work in the right direction for the Bruins, and they can, again, consistently put out efforts at this level and continue to play at this level on a regular basis, because that is definitely what we need to see from the Bruins, given the division that they're in and the competition that they have with Florida, with Tampa Bay, with Toronto, in that Atlantic division. That's a top-heavy division. Buffalo's off to a better start than they were expected to. Detroit, I mean, obviously the Bruins just hammered the Red Wings, but Detroit's off to a little bit better of a start than a lot of people were expecting this year. So, it's not an easy division, especially at the top. And if Boston's going to be that playoff level team, and not just a playoff team, but a team that can go deep into the playoffs, they're going to have to continue to play like this on a regular basis. And they can't have, the ups and the downs and the ups and the downs and the roller coaster that they seem to have been on. They need to continue to play at this high level on a much more regular basis. And I'm hoping that they can build off of these last couple of games and maybe string like 4 or 5 wins together and really start to show that they are one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. And not just some of the time, but all the time. Another thing I want to look at here is those Atlantic Division standings. Because obviously, Boston's got some stiff competition here. And if we pull this up and take a look at what the Atlantic looks like right now, in first place, you've got the Florida Panthers. Boston is the only team that has beaten the Florida Panthers so far. It was a shootout loss for the Panthers, so they haven't lost in regulation yet, but they are still sitting there in first place, and in first place by quite a bit over the Toronto Maple Leafs. They are 9-0-1 on the season. They've got 19 points. And Florida's been absolutely spectacular to start this year. But that one team that's been able to beat them was the Bruins. So that's a really good sign there for Boston. Toronto right now sits in second place. However, this is where games in hand really play a role, because Toronto has played 3 more games than the Bruins. They only have 1 more win than Boston, but they've played 3 more games, and that has them up in second place at 6-4-1. Toronto was struggling a little bit, but they've won 4 in a row now. The Maple Leafs have very quietly put together a bit of a run here. They've won 4 straight games. Interestingly enough, Toronto Maple Leafs' next opponent is the Boston Bruins tomorrow night, and we're definitely going to be talking more about that game later on when we look ahead to the upcoming schedule. But Boston was able to snap Florida's winning streak. Could they maybe snap this streak that the Leafs are on right now? We'll find out Saturday night. But Toronto right now sits in second place. However, they have played 11 games and are 6-4-1 on the year. Tampa Bay, after a really, really sluggish start, has started to put their game back together. They're now 5-3-2 on the season. They've got 12 points. They're in third place right now in the Atlantic. Tampa looked like they had a real bad Stanley Cup hangover going on for those first couple weeks of the year, but they've definitely gotten things back on track here recently. And started to look much more like the Tampa Bay Lightning are expected to look. So Tampa is going to be a tough matchup without a doubt. They are certainly not as good as they've been the past couple of years. And again, that's expected given what they've lost over the course of, the offseason and all the contracts that they weren't able to keep. But Tampa is still a very good team and is going to be a tough matchup for the Bruins for sure. Buffalo right now sits in 4th place in the Atlantic with a 5-4-1 record, 11 points through 10 games for the Buffalo Sabres. Now, they started out really, really hot. Buffalo had an incredibly good start to this season. However, when we look over here at how they're streaking, L3. They've lost 3 straight games now in regulation. This was a team that was 5-1-1 through their first 7 games. Now they've lost 3 in a row. They've fallen right back down close to 500, and they've been passed by the Maple Leafs and the Lightning in the standings. And Buffalo now is, a little bit on a losing streak. We'll see if that continues or if they're able to get back into the win column. But I do think that the magic is going to run out for the Sabres here at some point. Obviously they got off to a great start. They've been playing better. They've got a lot more wins than a lot of people expected them to have already at this point of the season. But with that losing streak now at 3, I think things are starting to come back down to earth for Buffalo. They obviously just traded Jack Eichel to Vegas. So, he wasn't playing anyway because of his injury, but That whole, we'll see how that affects the locker room and just that whole drama being over with Buffalo. See if that has any effect on the team. But the Sabres are starting to come back down to earth. Then down in 5th place, we have the Boston Bruins. Now, I certainly don't think that the Bruins are a 5th place team. I think this is just a matter of games in hand. Boston has only played 8 games. Everybody else in this division has played at least 10. So Boston's played less games than every other team in the division. They've got a good record, though, at 5-3. And honestly, I think Boston could very easily be a 2nd place team in this division if they had the same number of games played. This game coming up against Toronto is going to be a big one tomorrow night. That's going to almost be like a measuring stick game of where are we at. They just beat the Panthers last weekend. If they can beat Toronto this weekend, I think that proves that Boston is going to end up here near the top of this division. And that they're a team that belongs there and is good enough to be there. They just right now haven't played the games. Games in hand are only worth anything if you win them and make up those points. If you don't win the games in hand, then it doesn't really matter. But if they can win some of these games in hand and make up those points, Boston could easily be at 14 points right now as opposed to 10, and that would have them 2nd in the division, which I think they're much closer to being that level team than a 5th place team. Down in 6 right now is the Detroit Red Wings, who the Bruins just beat. The Red Wings are very similar to Buffalo. They started this season off a lot better than people were expecting them to be, and they looked a lot better than people were expecting. However, they're starting to come back down to earth. Just like the Buffalo Sabres, Detroit is also on a 3-game losing streak. Their record has dropped from, they were 4-2-2 to start the year, and now they're 4-5-2. So they've lost 3 straight. They've dropped below 500. And despite some early signs of progress and definitely some young players having a big impact on the Detroit Red Wings, they're still not quite ready yet to make that next jump. And I think we're seeing the Red Wings kind of fall back down to earth as well and get back to being closer to what we were expecting the Red Wings to be this season. And then down at the bottom of the division, you've got the Ottawa Senators and the Montreal Canadiens. Both of these teams have really, really struggled out of the gate. Ottawa is 3-6-1. They only have 7 points through 10 games, a -10 goal differential. And, the Senators are, obviously a young team, still kind of in the rebuild phase and not ready to take that next step yet. And then Montreal has just been absolutely putrid this season. 3-9 to start the year, -16 goal differential. They haven't had Carey Price. They haven't had Joel Edmondson. They're not going to have Shea Weber ever again. So, Montreal seems like they haven't been able to overcome the pieces out of the lineup that they've had out of the lineup. Cole Caulfield got sent down. I mean, this was a guy, Cole Caulfield was the betting favorite to be Rookie of the Year this year, and he's been sent down to the AHL. Can't even stick up in Montreal. Their whole season has just been an absolute disaster to this point. So they sit in the bottom of the Atlantic right now with just 6 points through 12 games. But that is what the division looks like right now. Obviously, Florida, certainly the best team so far. But Tampa, Boston, Toronto, I think those 3 are all going to be in the mix fighting for position all season long. I think we're starting to see Buffalo and Detroit kind of fall back to earth after having very good starts. And then Ottawa and Montreal are just not very good and aren't going to be very good at all this season. So that is a look at the Atlantic Division. Again, these teams, everyone's right around 10 games. Boston's played less than pretty much anybody else. But the rest of the divisions all played like 10, 11, 12 games somewhere in there. So good early look at kind of where teams are at so far. And we'll certainly keep up with the rest of the Atlantic as this season goes along. Maybe do like a division standings check-in once a month or something like that, just to see where Boston is relatively to their competition and what the other teams in the Atlantic are doing. But, yeah, I mean, it's been a solid start. Bruins certainly have nothing to complain about being 5-3-0. They've played really well their past couple of games. They're in 5th place right now, but again, they've played less games than everyone else. They're more of like a 2nd, 3rd place type team, and that's pretty much right where I expected them to be this year. And again, if they can get a little bit more consistency going and build off of these past couple of wins, then maybe we could see them up there in 2nd place ahead of Toronto, ahead of Tampa Bay, and, they could be one of the best teams in the East again this year. So now I want to take a look ahead here to the upcoming schedule for the Boston Bruins and just kind of look at who their next matchups are this upcoming week. Now, their schedule does fill out a little bit more for this coming week, and then we get another long break in the middle of November, which is kind of annoying. We're going to talk about the schedule here, too, and just the really inconsistent start. There's no flow to this season whatsoever so far because Boston keeps having these long breaks. So if we take a look here, we go back to October. Let's just look at this schedule. First of all, Boston finishes their preseason here on October 6th against the Capitals. Then they have a 10-day break before their regular season starts. While almost every other team started on either the 12th, the 13th, or the 14th, Boston doesn't play a regular season game until the 16th. They're one of the last teams in the league to get going this regular season. Have this massive 10-day break between the end of the preseason and the start of the reg. Then after playing just one game when they were the last team to get going in the NHL, they then have a random 3-day break for some reason before playing their second game. Then we get a little bit of regularity in the schedule. Game against Philly, day off. Game against Buffalo, day off. Game against San Jose, couple days off before a back-to-back. That's not anything weird right there, especially heading into a back-to-back. Not odd to have a couple days off. Then they got back-to-back games against Florida and Carolina, a day off, and then they play Florida again on the 30th. So you get into somewhat of a groove here during these 2 weeks. Starting with the Philly game through this second Florida game, you get into a normal NHL schedule here. And then they have another random massive break of like 4 days to start November. Nothing on Sunday, nothing on Monday, nothing on Tuesday, nothing on Wednesday. Then they play Detroit, last night. A day off. They play Toronto tomorrow. Couple days off. They play Ottawa on the 9th. Day off. They play Edmonton the 11th. Day off. They play New Jersey on the 13th, Montreal on the 14th, and then we have this other huge break here, 5 straight days off in the middle of November. This weird start to the schedule continues here through November, and quite honestly, I don't know what caused this, why the Bruins are having these weird breaks, but it does continue, unfortunately, here. So just as we'll be getting into the flow of having hockey on pretty much an every other night basis, or at least only a couple days off before the next game, all of a sudden after this Montreal game on the 14th, we're going to have this random huge break in the middle of November where there's just 5 days without a game. I don't get it. I don't know why it was scheduled this way. I don't know what caused this in the schedule. It's just really, really weird. I don't think I've ever seen this before where teams had like no flow to the schedule to start like this, where there's like a couple weeks of normal scheduling, then a week with a really big break, and then another couple weeks of normal scheduling, and then a week with a really big break. Like I just don't get it. And it's kind of annoying, to be honest with you, because it really does interfere with just the flow of the schedule and hockey being back and, having Bruins, relatively every other night or close to it. And these long breaks are just kind of odd. And there's nothing you can do about it. That's the schedule. That's the way it is. It's just really odd and kind of annoying, at least for me as a Bruins fan. But anyway, it's time now. We're going to preview the upcoming week of games. Boston has 3 games between now, the 5th, and next week's episode, which will be on the 12th. Starting with the Toronto Maple Leafs on Saturday night, tomorrow night, up in Toronto. I am so excited for this game. The Bruins haven't played the Maple Leafs well, they didn't play it all last year. They didn't play it all in the bubble. So you have to go back to the last time they played during, 2019, basically, or maybe early 2020. I don't remember if they played at all in early 2020 before the season got cut short, or if it goes all the way back to 2019. Either way, it's been over a year. Well over a year, since the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Boston Bruins have played. This is one of the best rivalries in the NHL, one of the best Atlantic Division rivalries. Such a great matchup every time these two teams play. The rivalries between the fans are, almost as heated as the rivalries on the ice. Like, it's Bruins Maple Leafs. It's Boston Toronto. This is as good as it gets. And these two teams haven't played in so long. It is going to be so awesome to rekindle this rivalry again, to get back playing the Maple Leafs. And this is a huge game. We just looked at the standings. Boston's 5-3-0. Toronto is 6-4-1. Toronto is just a little bit ahead of them in the standings by 3 points. However, Boston does have 3 games in hand. And if they can win the head-to-head matchup and cut it to a 1-point difference while still having 3 games in hand, that'd be absolutely awesome for the Bruins. So this is a huge Saturday night game. I'm sure it's just as big for the Leafs and for Leafs fans as well, but I am so excited to see how this one goes. And honestly, can't wait for this matchup. And certainly, I think of all the Bruins games coming up this next week, this is by far the one that I am most excited for. After playing in Toronto, they head back home and they get a couple of days off, Sunday and Monday, and then they play the Ottawa Senators on Tuesday night. This is a game that the Boston Bruins absolutely have to win. They cannot afford to drop a game to a losing bottom of the division type team like the Ottawa Senators. And listen, this is not going to be an easy game. Ottawa is very hard to play against. Ottawa always brings an effort every single night. They're not a team that's just going to roll over and let you win, but they're a team that only has 3 wins on the season right now and is 3-6-1 and in 7th place. This is a team that the Boston Bruins need to be beating every single time that they play. And especially at home, the Bruins cannot afford to drop this game. So this is a game that I'm looking at. I'm hoping that the Bruins play and dominate as well as they did when they played the Red Wings last night. Like, I'm looking for this to be a very similar game as to when they played Detroit last night. 5-1 type of game, maybe 4-1, something like that. Bruins in complete control the entire time. That's what they need to do against the Ottawa Senators as well. And then finally on Thursday, November 11th, Boston plays again at home against the Edmonton Oilers. This is not an easy game. The Edmonton Oilers are off to a fantastic start this season. They're 8-1-0 to start the year. They're top of the Pacific Division. McDavid and Draisaitl have been absolutely lighting it up. This is not an easy game for the Boston Bruins. It's going to be another, high-end matchup against a top-notch team, like when they played Florida and like when they played Carolina. And I'm going to be really interested to see how the Bruins do in this game against the Oilers. I'm mostly going to be watching the defense and how the Bruins defensively are able to handle the speed of the Edmonton Oilers, the speed of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, the just offensive ability that the Oilers have and the sheer amount of goals that they score. They're one of the top offensive teams in the NHL. I'm really looking to see if Boston can shut that down, or how, maybe not completely shut it down, but how Boston can limit Edmonton's offense and keep them under wraps, and see if Boston can, win this game and be able to score more goals than the Oilers and keep the Oilers from scoring 5 or 6 goals in this game. That's going to be a really, really interesting one against Edmonton, because that is a tough matchup. just like the Panthers, just like the Hurricanes, who we've seen already. This is a really tough matchup against one of the best teams so far in the NHL this year. So this is not an easy set of 3 games here this coming week, especially Toronto and Edmonton are going to be very, very tough. Ottawa is a game that they absolutely should win. It's not going to be easy, but they should win it. The other two, more of a toss-up, and I would say Edmonton, Boston's probably the underdog in the Edmonton game. I don't know if they will be, from like a betting line standpoint, but I think the Oilers are probably more likely to win that game. The Oilers have been better than the Bruins to start this year, just because the Oilers have been better than almost anybody to start this year. They've been a top 3 team in the league so far this season. So that's a really tough one. And again, I'm going to be very focused on Boston's ability or inability to keep Edmonton off the scoreboard. And that's definitely going to be something that we'll be talking about during next week's show, depending on how that Oilers game goes, is, was the defense good enough for the Bruins? But all in all, looking at this schedule, obviously 3 games, a possible 6 points on the line there. I would be happy if the Bruins get 4 out of 6 points here. If they win 2 out of these 3 games and get 4 out of 6 points, I'm happy with this week for the Bruins. If they get 3 out of 6, it's more not great, but not worst case scenario either. If they get less than 3 points out of this coming week, then this is a failed week as far as the Bruins are concerned. 3 is okay. 4, I'm happy. And then anything more than 4, if they get 5 or 6 out of these possible 6 points, then it's just a very successful week, more than I was expecting from the Bruins. And, obviously a really pleasant surprise week for Boston to have a really, really good result against some really tough opponents. So that's pretty much what I'm looking at here for this coming week. I think 4 out of 6 points would be good. Anything more than that is above and beyond, in my opinion. It would be really, really good. 3 is okay, and less than 3 is not good enough if you're the Bruins. So we'll see how it goes. They've got Toronto on Saturday. They've got Ottawa on Tuesday, and they've got Edmonton on Thursday. And by the time we get to next week's show, we'll know how these games went, and we'll be previewing the upcoming week after that, which is basically just the next weekend, because, again, weird long break in the middle of November here, but we'll deal with that next week. But just want to kind of look ahead to the schedule there, and that's what I got for you here for episode 42. BNG Weekly, we come to the end here. Again, I want to look back on these past couple of games, talk about Patrice Bergeron and his big breakout game against Detroit. Hopefully he can build off that and, really get going on a consistent game-to-game basis now for the Bruins. I want to talk about, we looked at the Atlantic Division and kind of where everyone is at right now and how the Bruins stack up. Talked about this weird schedule to start the year, which is honestly starting to get pretty annoying. And then we looked ahead to the upcoming week of games, these 3 games that the Bruins have this week, all against Canadian teams, which is interesting. Toronto, Ottawa, and Edmonton, all Canadian matchups. 2 at home, 1 on the road. And again, we'll see how the Bruins do, and we'll report back next week with the results of these 3 games. But that's going to do it here for episode 42 of Black and Gold Weekly. Again, I want to thank Mark Allred and the entire team at Black and Gold Productions. This show would not be happening without them. So their support is greatly, greatly appreciated. Also, check out the blackandgoldhockey.com, which is the BNG website. Our team of writers putting out awesome Bruins content each and every day. Also, a huge podcast network with a bunch of different Bruins-related shows on it. You can find all of that at blackandgoldhockey.com. Also want to remind you about the links down in the description. If you're in the market for any sort of apparel, whether it's Boston Bruins, any other NHL team, or an NCAA college, you can find it all using the links down in the description. That would be greatly appreciated. And I just want to thank you guys for watching. obviously, we wouldn't be able to do this if we didn't have an audience. So thank you guys for all tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the episode. I'll be back next week with episode 43. We'll have a whole new week of Bruins hockey to talk about, and we'll look to the upcoming week next week as well. So that's going to do it here. Again, I'm John, your host of Black and Gold Weekly. Really appreciate everyone watching. Have a great weekend. Talk to you guys soon.